Hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Yeah. To never jam. Get down, down. Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all up with his name. We call him the chief. The chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Go and track down the truth. What a track down the truth, you know. And what do they call him? We call him the chief. You damn right we do.
I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can find Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube and Rumble. And this show, Morning Coffee with the Chief, broadcasts every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You know, there's a lot of things I want to talk about here, but I just want to remind you can find me also on X at LASD Jordan. I do post about a wide variety of things. And I do have a radio show that broadcasts every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is called Briefing with the Chief, in which I go over politics or public policy issues. And I've really been focusing on the protests because I see as time goes on, we're going to see more and more where police, both federal and local, state and local, are going to be targeted by the protesters. Because it has been my experience, the protesters represent the executive branch. The police represent the executive branch, and they're on the streets with the protesters, and the protesters want conflict with the executive branch. If everybody's peaceful and it's quiet, it just doesn't make the news hours, so they always got to kind of ramp it up to create that controversy. They always force the police to make arrests and use force to make those arrests. And then, of course, they call it police violence and police brutality. And they get stuck in the middle on these things. And you can see it ramping up now. And I did a show, it's called for Briefing with the Chief a couple weeks ago, the left's middle finger to the voters. And that's really, hey, we're gonna ramp up the protests and we're gonna target people. And you see it with the firebombing of Teslas. You see it with the swatting of conservative, doxing of the Doge people, that the violence is going on. And now we're beginning to see it with the protests. We saw it at a New Jersey immigration thing where the mayor went out there. The interesting thing, the mayor's been the mayor since 2014. He has not once protested in front of that immigration facility, which has been there before 2014. So when Obama was the president and deporting people, he didn't protest. But he's out there now. He's running for governor. He pushes the envelope. He pushes it with police. And then he blames the police. That this is a strategy they used when Trump was first in office. This is the strategy they use to build their base. And cops get stuck in the middle. So I'm going to do a show on that stuff tomorrow again and talk about it again. It's just going to have to be a recurring theme so that I remind the folks that police get stuck in the middle by these political operatives who are just pushing the envelope to try and gain some political traction at a time, really, when the left has lost a lot of political traction. So they're going to use violence, disruption, civil disobedience to get the attention of the media and the public, and of course characterize the police, who are the most visible form of the executive branch on the street, poorly, right? That's what they're going to do. Now, before we get into a show, we're going to do The Bad Lieutenant. I always say, I say that wrong. I say The Bad Lieutenant, the movie. It's Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel today. But before we get into that, I need to talk about the LA Mission. So the LA Mission is downtown Los Angeles, services the needs of the homeless. It's at losangelesmission.org. They're going through some changes there. They need some support. They are a faith-based organization, which is kind of really good for the movie today. It's I don't want to say it's a faith-based movie, but it has some faithful themes in it. Anyways, the The Los Angeles Mission has been there for 85 years. They're servicing the needs of the homeless. They serve them food. They give them some basic services, and they use those as an opportunity to look for folks that are ready to get off the streets, and then they give them wraparound services for 6 to 12 months, which includes cognitive behavioral therapy programs, which is the gold standard. If you're giving them that, then you got a chance, right? And drug and alcohol treatment and job skills, and tries to connect them as they recover with employers to get them off the streets. They, like I said, they are faith-based, so they don't get any money from government, so they count on people like me and you. So check out the losangelesmission.org and make a donation today. So Pope Leo, the new Pope, Leo the 14th, they had a conclave, and he's the first American Pope, and I thought, I should do a cop drama or cop movie with some kind of religious theme. And I do my search, and boom, this movie popped up, Bad Lieutenant. And I've been really reluctant to do it because it is not characteristic of the law enforcement officers that I know, that the people that I've worked with. But I realize that you could take the bad lieutenant and make it the bad engineer, the bad CEO. That you can put it in any industry, and you can characterize a despicable person in a movie. But it always seems to work for cop drama because there's a whole lot more interesting things going on there in police work. So I really was reluctant to do this, but I decided, you know what? I watched the movie. I said, let me do this movie. Let's talk about it, because there is a great deal of religious themes. And I got to throw out there. So I just found out yesterday that a relative of mine, by law, actually went to school with Pope Leo. Now, wow, who knew, right? And he knows him by first name. They're friendly. Of course, he hasn't seen him in years because they're different paths. But so I'm going back home, and hopefully I'll be able to talk to my in-law and find a little bit more about Pope Leo. So kind of interesting. But so let me introduce my show, and I'll bring on the guest. So let's see. The Bad Lieutenant was released in 1992. It's an American neo-noir crime film directed by Abel Ferrara and stars the great actor Harvey Keitel, who he does leading roles, and he does character roles, and he was in Taxi Driver. You remember he was the pimp in the Taxi Driver. Yeah, he is Gambit. He is scary, but you know what? He's not realistic, right? That's the thing about it. He's just not realistic. But I understand, the exaggeration of this character to kind of make the movie is, so just popped in to say hello. Hey, how you doing, Penny? Have a good time with your grandkids. I have the grandkids. Yeah. Well, maybe this might not be the show to watch them with them. This is really pretty bad. Enjoy those little ones. Yes. Okay. All right. So it was, and it really has some really deep, dark themes. And like I said, I was really reluctant to do this one because it sounds like the good approach to homeless. Yeah, it is. If you look up cognitive behavioral therapy program, you'll see that is the critical piece. If you're going to reduce recidivism and if you're going to get people off the homeless, you really do have to have some kind of coercive program if you're going to be successful. Now that they don't do coercion down there, they do faith. But once you they make the decision to go in, and if you give that kind of treatment, you stand a better chance. Hey, good morning, Gambit. But let's bring on our guest. We got the old veteran, Danny Cruz. He's been around, Sergeant Danny Cruz. He's retired, and he's back. He's been having some technical difficulties. So we'll see. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
I'm real good, Pat. How are you this morning?
Pretty good. And then we got Eric Scott. He's Eric Fox. Eric Fox. He's back and coming from parts unknown. He's a part-time California refugee. So he just said where he's at. It's about $2 a gallon for gas. I'm jealous, right? So it's supposed to go to $8 a gallon here in California, which is crazy.
284, but still
284. Yeah, a lot cheaper. All right, hey, before
Pat, you successfully screwed up both of our last names.
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for pointing me out, Danny. I can always count on you. So, hey, listen. I'll let you guys talk about the political piece I did on the front end. So I am doing some shows regarding the demonstrations and how cops always get put in the middle. So this is your chance to either validate it or disagree. What do you think, Danny?
About what? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, the cops getting put in the middle on these protests.
Oh yeah, they're definitely in the middle. They're the ones that's going to have to deal with the whole thing. Management's going to deal with it. The cops are going to deal with it. No one else has anything. The politicians, they're just going to wash their hands of it and keep moving on and doing all the stupid stuff they're doing. So, yeah, we're definitely in the middle of it.
I mean, if you look at, it doesn't matter what side you were on the whole J6 thing. Those cops were left short-staffed and took some of them took a beating, right? And because of poor political decisions. And I just see the same thing happening, but all the demonstrations I've had to deal with, either as I was working on, because they just put me in plain clothes in these things, or as an incident commander, there's always an effort over time for the protesters to engage with the police officers, to create controversy, to hit the news hour, right? that for me, there'll always be a group that pushes that confrontation. Do you agree with me on that, Eric? You worked our emergency operations bureau. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the frontline boots on the ground officers and deputies will always do what they're told to do, and that is hold the line and make arrests. And luckily for them, they're just following orders. It's the incident commanders, such as when you were an incident commander or other incident commanders, that are now left to answer to the higher ups. And those higher ups, it used to be the sheriff was an elected position. The sheriff was autonomous. The board of supervisors was a funding source, but now it's completely flipped. Now the board of supervisors is telling the sheriff what to do, which is, to me, incredible. The city of LA has always been the same. I mean, that chief of police, no matter who it is, how great that person is, has to answer that city council and specifically to that mayor. And I hate to use the term, but they're just a puppet. As much as they support their troops, they want to do the right thing. At the end of the day, if they arrest the wrong person, the perception is seen wrong. It's the mayor that comes down to the chief. And in this position now, but the county board of supervisors calls on the sheriff and says, what the heck, and again, and the poor guys on the front line and young ladies are just out there trying to do the Lord's work. And they always end up on the short end of the stick, not so much politically within the department, unless there's a policy violation, but personal perception set by the public and the news media, who sometimes exasperates the situation.
Yeah, they obviously clearly mischaracterized it. It was interesting. The latest flashpoint is in New Jersey at that detention facility. Never protested before under Obama, never protested before at all. But now they're protesting. Now they want to do inspections. Now they got to see what's going on.
Yeah,
and
I think that these representatives think that just because they're a representative, they have a shield around them that precludes them from following the law. And like I told my daughter this morning, they have a title. They don't have any special, anything. If you break the law, you're just another person that broke the law, and you're going to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, that's why I think a body camera is helping us out, because I saw the body cam footage and I go, wait a minute, I don't see cops hitting anybody. I think they're just trying to break people apart so they can make arrests, and they're and people are pushing and prodding them, so including the representatives. And so I'll probably address that on my show tomorrow, where I talk about, if you're doing an inspection, even if you're a House of Representative, there's still rules and regulations that you have to follow as you do that, and those are the security protocols at the facility. I think people forget there is a thing called the separation of power. So yes, Congress has a right to come and do inspections, but they have to follow the reasonable precautions and rules set by the executive branch in doing that.
Right. And don't bring all the media folks and all your protesters behind you to get a reaction out of those employees.
Yeah, you don't have to. Yes, exactly. So it's I just I'm going to retract this subject over time, Danny, because I just think it's going to keep ramping up and ramping up and ramping up and getting worse and worse and worse. So what do you think?
The big hypocrisy behind the whole deal is, I get a kick out of this. Okay, I live down in San Diego County, and the big news right now is the Tijuana border crisis, or the Tijuana sewage crisis where
Right.
sewage water from Tijuana is coming into into the San Diego and polluting the beaches all the way up to just about Encinitas. So even the beaches in Coronado are being affected by it. And this is where our Navy SEALs train.
Wow.
And then on top of that, a couple of days ago, a migrant smuggling boat came up and capsized. I want to say up in San Diego, city of San Diego proper, I believe it was, and 3 people died in it. And so our great Congressman, Mike Levin, who is a Democrat, who has supported all this border crossings, you got to come on over and everything like that, is now asking for $60 million and new technology to catch people smuggling people across the border.
Yeah.
And I'm going, really, dude?
Yeah, the switch. I always just hate the language. It drives me crazy. Okay, so they use legitimate force and they call it police violence, right? They have all these little code words to shift the public's perspective, and it's the media's fault. I think that's all the media's fault because they're doing it on purpose and they know what they're doing. But we got to talk about the bad lieutenant. Okay, so listen. Obviously Pope Leo came in here and I said, let me look for a movie that has a theme of Catholicism, faith, and this movie popped up on my search, and I go, oh, I had seen this movie before. It's pretty dark, and it's not depending on how you look at it, it's But one of the reasons why I really in the past I didn't want to do this movie is it's this lieutenant is people watch this movie go, oh, this is what goes on in police work all the time. No, this is crazy. This guy, he'd have been fired in probation if he was doing this all his whole career, right? He wouldn't have made it to lieutenant. And even after making a lieutenant, this would have been figured out like that, at least on my department. And I know New York's got, they have their challenges, but I don't think even in New York, this guy would have lasted that long. So what do you guys think, Dan? You think I'm onto something there? I think that's true.
Yeah, you are. It's the truth. It was like, and I'll be honest, full disclosure here. I didn't watch the whole movie. I got to a certain point where I said, I can't watch this crap anymore because that's just totally stupid.
Yeah.
Where a guy's smoking crack, snorting coke, smoking heroin, doing all this other stupid stuff in a 24-hour period between. The guy he used more drugs in between 2 baseball games than your normal cluck or crackhead would on the streets. And we've all seen it. We've all been to the hood, and people in the hood don't use that much dope.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're on the shelf somewhere for 24 or 36 hours, which means then you're not showing up to work, right?
Yeah. Which on the flip side, I have worked with people that have been involved in the activity that we're talking about. So
yeah,
and they were fired.
Right. Well, yeah, you detected it, but there are people in society that chip away at this stuff, but this guy wasn't chipping at anything.
He was hardcore.
He was hardcore, yeah, and and that's why I think sometimes they put these settings in a police work framework just because they want to contrast good and evil, and I think in this movie implying that a good man went bad, and he's trying to fight his way back, and and because this is one of the reasons why I don't always do these movies with cops this going crazy like this, is I don't see it as completely it's not realistic at all. I mean, it's not like cops don't use drugs, cops don't become alcoholics, and cops don't engage in prostitution, but the depth of the depravity this guy get into, I just would have been detected quickly in my mind, anyways. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I know we had Michael Dowd. Was he the 50? So they had these scandals in New York where people are dealing drugs and that kind of stuff. But this wasn't my experience at all, and I think that's the reality for most cops. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, well, let's roll the first scene. Harvey Keitel. We do got to talk a little bit about Harvey Keitel because, he plays a pretty good degenerate in this movie, but he's also a pretty good actor in a lot of other movies, right? And I mean, I remember from Reservoir Dogs. I haven't done that movie yet, And here's the scene where he's actually in his suburban home here with his family, which is another thing. The family's got to recognize something's going on with their husband, right? And but I also saw him. He was we did Taxi Driver. I did the movie Taxi Driver. I think John Bayless was on that. I can't remember who my other guest was. And he was in it. He plays the pimp in that movie. And but a lot of great movies, and I think he's an excellent actor. And he goes from this one, he's the lead, but he goes from a lead to a character actor. But he plays a pretty good villain, and I see him essentially as a villain in this movie. What do you think of Harvey Keitel, Danny?
Actually, he's a pretty good bad guy actor.
Yeah,
I've seen him in a couple of other movies, and he plays like an Adam Henry New York cop would be, just or Adam Henry New Yorker, period, just because he's got that attitude. But he grew up, I believe he grew up in the Bronx or something like that. So
he was. Somebody reminded he was in Copland. He was great in Copland. But he was also a psychopathic bad guy lieutenant in Copland as well. So I guess he just reappraised his role here. So what do you think, Harvey Keitel, the actor, Eric?
You know what? I think he did a great job in studying the subject, specifically smoking heroin. The effects when his whatever girlfriend injects him. It just the effects, the symptoms, the alcoholism. I think he really did a really good job overall. I mean, great acting, I think, on his part. But it's just like you said in the beginning, and I even told my daughter this morning, it's such a dark movie. My goodness, it takes you into places where it's like, wow, and yeah, it sometimes people will assume or that cops like this, not only in New York, but in other parts are just like this. No, they're not. This is very rare, and it's a movie. It's entertainment.
Yeah. It's completely exaggerated. Have we had alcoholics on the department? Absolutely. Have we had people use coke? Absolutely. Have heroin? Absolutely. Indulged in the ladies, both boys and women? Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But this composite character where they're doing all this stuff, no, and he makes it to the rank of lieutenant. Yeah, and he goes, nobody questions him, right? I mean, I think he'd have been checked a long time ago.
Yeah.
Particularly when, we'll get into the scene, but coke falls out of his pocket at a crime scene.
They call him on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so anyways, he's a good actor. And here he is, he's with his sons. And this kind of sets it. So he's with his sons. He drops them off at Catholic schools in this scene. And then, I mean, he can't wait. As soon as he gets them dropped off, here his kid gives him a kiss. He snorts cocaine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can't even wait, right? And but here's the other thing. We have all interacted with chronic users, right? And I see him as a chronic user. There's a point in time where you can't hide it.
No.
You get a little sucked up, right? And your mannerisms change. Obviously, you can't hide it with the eyes. And yet he always looks like he's still put together. Yet he couldn't resist snorting coke. So Danny, talk about dropping his kids off and then having to have coke right there, and risky because he does it in front of everybody.
He had no problem. Definitely a deep-seated addiction. But like I said, I had a guy in my academy class. He after graduation, he got picked to be a undercover for narco. So the first 5 years of his career, he was out buying dope. He left narco and came to the same station I was working at. Got off training, doing real good.
Oh, we lost him. He froze up. Okay, Danny, you're going to have to probably log off and come back.
The whole time he was on training, the whole time he had been working the field with us, he was doing coke every night, on duty and off duty. It's like,
Wow.
Unfreaking believable. He was eventually fired, and then he died probably of an overdose or something like that. But these are the guys. I mean, it does happen. We do work with them. So, and
Well,
this one, he went undetected for the longest time. But on the flip side, his partner that he was working with was a stone cold drunk. So they got along good. And his partner, I was partner with his old partner too, and for a short while. And I'd go to work, and then I'd have to go to the bar. So we work graveyard shift. We'd go to work, and I'd have to go to the bar and pick him up. Come on, dude, let's get out of here. You got to go to work soon. So.
Yeah, I worked with somebody who was a big drinker, and I had to tell him, okay, dude, one night a week I'll have a beer with you, a couple beers with you. But man, he was every freaking night, and he eventually had to go on the wagon and to salvage his career. So it's not unusual that cops get into addiction. We talked about that, Danny, on other shows where
Yes.
going into alcoholism or addiction related to injuries, right? Those are things that happen both in law enforcement, fire services, and even the military, right? They get injured, they start taking some pain meds, and it leads to an addiction problem, right? So that part isn't unusual, but this is with Harvey Keitel. As we get through this movie, it's all pretty hedonistic, So here he is. He drops off his kids, and then he goes to a crime scene, and he's the lieutenant in charge. Now, I never saw, it's this different kind of culture on NYPD. I didn't see that many lieutenants showing up at the crime scenes. Like, of course, was it 3 girls killed? So probably that would get a big attention, right? 3 girls shot. But he shows up, and you would think that I think over time as I watch the movie, these guys realize there's something wrong with the lieutenant. They're just not saying anything.
Yeah.
Right.
They're just kind of ignoring him.
Like when he shows up at a crime scene looking like a homeless dude.
Yeah.
Definitely something's wrong.
They're managing the lieutenant, I guess, and this is what they're doing. But he's also a degenerate gambler, and here he is. He's either, I don't think he's acting as a bookie, but he's taking bets for the bookie. He's getting bets from these guys regarding the Mets, which is kind of a theme through here. I think he keeps betting that Dodgers are going to finally beat the Mets and that he'll win big, right? He keeps getting, this has fatal ramifications for him down the line, but he's also a degenerate gambler. So, I don't think they've missed anything. He's a sexual deviant. He's addicted to cocaine. He's addicted to heroin, and he's an alcoholic, and now he's a degenerate gambler. I think they got almost the trifecta going on here.
Well, the only thing wrong with him is he was rooting for the Dodgers. So.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, they kept showing Darryl Strawberry, right? And Darryl Strawberry's going to hit the home run and save the game, and he'll win his big money. But Darryl Strawberry was an addict, right? If you remember back in the day, we're all living in LA. He went through his own. I think it was. I'm curious, did they use that just because it was Darryl Strawberry? He had sex addiction issues. He had issues with cocaine. He had issues with alcohol as well. And I think he had gambling issues too. I just thought it was ironic. Why did they use him? So they always showed the clips of Darryl Strawberry, and I had to look it up. I go, yeah, he had all of those failings. So it was interesting that they dovetailed that in there, because they could have did it with anybody, right? Any player.
Yeah, Darryl Strawberry in LA. He had his issues. As a matter of fact, he missed games because he was.
We're getting some feedback from you there, Danny, and you're cutting out.
Okay, and like I said, I don't know what's going on here. But, Darryl Strawberry had his demons. He did miss some games in LA because he was at a crack house, and so it's like
he's addicted to everything. Yeah, but so is Darryl Strawberry. So I thought it was interesting how the director wrote that or weaved that in there. And I, being in LA when Darryl Strawberry was playing here, I remembered that, and I had to look it up. But I imagine these guys being in the industry, they probably, let's see, Abel Ferrara, the guy who directed was a strange word. So what do you think, Eric? They weave Darryl Strawberry in there too. two peas in the pod. Did you catch that when you were watching the movie, or did you think of that?
Oh yeah, I almost thought of it as what do they call it? A subtle hint, to kind of, like you said, to part them together, or an Easter egg, as they call them in the movie industry. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, you're right. He was a coke addict. I mean, and so that made it pretty interesting. And like I said, they focused on him primarily. They showed a couple of the players, but for the most part, it's just Daryl Strawberry.
Yeah, they linked them together in the movie, and obviously their issues are also linked. And let's roll the next scene and working with dealers. And they very quickly they show these, and they show him quickly. Well, basically in the front part of this movie they just show how far he's gone off the reservation here, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so he pretends like he's going to take down this guy, and the guy goes up on the third floor of this building here. And really what it is, and you can see, if you look at the bag, if you looked at it closely, it looks like an evidence bag, right?
Yep.
It's got the red seal on it, which is typical, right? So okay, all cops know that's an evidence bag, right? I guess all the public knows it too, right? And somehow he stole that, and he's given it to his dealer contact to sell so that he can get some money. Of course, he's got to, have again, and it's interesting. He gives it to him, and he says, "Oh, give me back," and then he takes a bunch and he puts it in a bindle to take it with him.
Then he licks his fingers, puts it on his gum.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. I don't see how this guy would work, but it does show just how far. Now this, stealing from the evidence locker and giving it to dealers to sell on the street, that did happen in New York quite a bit. I mean, that does happen, right? And we did a show. Let's see, The French Connection, and I'm trying to think of the one after that. Well, I know it was The Prince of the City. I don't know if you guys ever saw that movie. That actually with Treat Williams. That actually was based upon a true story. These special investigation units, some members had stolen the money or the drugs seized in the French Connection, replaced it with powder or flour, and then took it and sold it on the streets, which had caused the feds to get absolutely apoplectic. And then they started investigating all of the special investigation units in NYPD. And then the storyline, Treat Williams' character was part of one of those units, and he had come forward to testify against some people, because he was guilt, and they forced him to start testifying against all of his partners who were part of these groups. And so everybody goes down. Some guys commit suicide. But I didn't realize when I first watched Prince of the City it was based upon a true story, but it was based on a true story, and it was linked by the fact that the feds were pissed that the heroin seized in the French Connection was then stolen by the cops and sold on the street, and the only people that could have done it are these specialty investigative units. So it does happen, and there is precedence for that. But it does show just how far this guy's gone off the reservations, right, Danny? He's stealing out of evidence locker.
Yeah, and that's not actually that uncommon. And we know it happened with the sheriffs, with our department. It happened with the LAPD. Definitely happened with Compton. And, I don't think any police department is Long Beach PD. It happened with them. No police department, or at least moderate or large police department, is immune from that because it happens. And but the scale it was easy to tell that it was an evidence bag because it said in black letters right across evidence.
Well, I saw the red top on it, right? And I go, oh, okay. You're right, Danny. It's because I want to frame that a little differently, though. It is not uncommon, right, that as evidence is stolen, meaning it does happen. I mean, I wouldn't say it's common. It's not uncommon, and it does happen, right? So a little. Yeah, and you're right. Compton was. I did 3 months at Compton before I was able to escape, right? And that sounds like a movie, Escape from Compton. But we got there, and they hadn't destroyed or disposed any evidence for 10 years. Guns were missing, dope was missing, their tracking systems were awful, and I think they tasked narcotics with going through and homicide with going through all that stuff. They had to put a task force together to deal with that stuff, and I never really, like I said, I escaped, so I never really got the full outcome. What were the findings of that investigation? Were you aware? Did you hear?
I believe Fred Reynolds, who's a retired homicide sergeant, he was original Compton PD, and I think he was tasked with doing some of that. But again, never really know what the outcome of it was. Excuse me. I lost my train of thought because you asked me a question.
Okay. Well, let's see. Wasn't it part of the American Gangster Story where NYPD sold French Connection heroin to the streets? I haven't done that show, but I wouldn't be surprised because you gotta get outlets. You gotta find an outlet for that stuff because cops generally don't have networks, right? So they gotta give it to somebody. You're talking Frank Lucas heroin, but it just. I think that's an example. So I want to say it doesn't happen often, but it happens enough to where it's a legitimate storyline, I guess, for the movie, right? That things are stolen out of the evidence locker. What, do you agree with that, Eric?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and going back to Compton for a second, Fred Reynolds was out of my academy class, a great guy, and he would tell me stories. Yeah, it was when we took over Compton, and they opened up that vault, and they had guns in there. They had no markings. They didn't have no evidence stickers. They were just thrown in there. I was working at a very large station when the Arco Narco case went down, and I was there when they took one guy down in the parking lot at the station.
Right.
So like Pat said, it's not uncommon. It's not common, but it is not uncommon. And I think,
see, that was one vice that they didn't show in the movies. They hit everything else, but they didn't show ripping off the dopers for their cash like the Arco Narco thing.
yeah.
I bet it happened with him.
What I was thinking about is when you look back at the time frame of this movie, they're depicting the early 90s. So it was a lot more prevalent then than it is now. So there's a lot more prevalent then than it is in the 21st century period. So,
and it was right about the same time as Arco. It was 1992. So
it was the height of the crack epidemic, right?
Yeah,
so a lot of drugs flowing in, a lot of corruption, and not sufficient systems and control in place, right?
I went on loan in 92 to Narco for a year, and I saw a lot of the Arco Narco guys go down. As a matter of fact, when I was at one station before I went on loan to Narco, one of the station detectives and her husband who worked in Narco, they were both rolled up and arrested and had their front yard dug up looking for cash. So but it is ironic that was the only vice that they didn't show in the movie was the millions of dollars that were getting stolen.
Right. Probably what?
He probably would have made more money, easier money if he just stole the money instead of the cocaine or the drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm surprised they didn't throw in a little bit PCP in there too,
That was right in the middle of that too.
Hamilton PCP.
Well, I guess he does have some values. He's not using PCP, he's not dropping acid, and he's not stealing the drug dealer's money. His drug dealer guy said, hey, you got to be careful with that stuff. It'll be bad for you. Do you remember? Do you hear the line? He responded, "What? He said, what are you, my drug counselor?"
Yeah.
So I thought that was great, So, but even the drug dealer says, "Hey, man, dude, what's up, man? You're destroying your life. What are you doing?" Mm-hmm. And
back then, we'd go out when I was on loan to Narco. We'd go out and we'd hook up the dealers, for a rock here and a rock there. Those guys never use their product. They'd be proud of the fact that they could smoke weed all night long, but they said, we don't touch this stuff. We just sell it.
Yeah.
Well, and because as soon as you do, you're going to use it, right? As soon as you get hooked, you're going to use your own product. And because a lot of this is, I never worked in narcotics, but a lot of it's consignment, right? I'm going to give you an ounce, you sell, and you pay me back, right? That's not uncommon, right? I mean, that is probably common, right, Danny?
Yeah, that's mostly how they work. Is you take care of this and then pay me back, and if you don't, then you end up dead.
Right. So if you start using your product, you can't quite, hey, lady, how you doing? Good morning. If you use your product, you can't quite pay people back, right? Unless you've
Exactly.
got a bank account to do that. So, so the guys who were just smoking marijuana, they probably had a pretty good idea, all right, hey, I don't want to get on the wrong side of, Tukey or whoever, right? I want to, well, Tukey was a user. He wasn't, that guy wasn't. Tukey Williams, right? He was, he wasn't a rock. He wasn't really a leader of anything in my mind. But hey, we got to do Chasing the Dragon, because Eric kind of hit up on it, that Keitel really studied what's going, the drug use stuff here going on. And what I saw was Chasing the Dragon. Now, Danny, you work narcotics. You want to explain exactly what Harvey's doing here and what Chasing the Dragon is?
What it looks like. This might be one of the scenes that I missed. Okay, he put a rock in a pipe or some heroin in a pipe, and he's just going to heat it up and ingest it through his lungs. That's the second most quick way to get stuff into your system.
Well, this one actually, I'm going to back up that. So he's got a foil. He's got a piece of foil. He's got heroin on it, and they're lighting the bottom, and the heroin then does what? It turns from a solid into
it'll turn into a gas or a vapor, and that'll go into a system. That'll go into a system.
And he uses
or is
a
he
straw.
Going to shoot it, or
he's using a straw to suck it up, right? So he uses a straw. So that's Chasing the Dragon. He's using the straw to chase the. All right, how come the chief knows that, dude?
Because I'm watching this.
Okay.
I'm watching the scene here because.
Well, then he goes to something else, right? But yeah, see, he's got his little, whatever straw there, and he's sucking.
Aluminum foil, made out of aluminum foil.
Yeah, I put it on aluminum foil, and then he heated it up, and I mean, I only arrested a few people for heroin, and some heroin user explained that, well, this is Chasing the Dragon. You just kind of, and heat it up on the foil, and then you use a straw to suck up the smoke, right?
You're actually chasing the smoke stream coming up.
Yeah, chasing the smoke stream, Chasing the Dragon. So, but all right, so let's talk about that. So what happens? Because there's central nervous, there's stimulants and there's depressants. So what happens when you chase the dragon? What happens when you take heroin, Danny?
You get loaded.
Well, you go on the nut, right? Which is exactly
you're talking about something from 30 years ago.
All right, you go on the nod, right? So
yeah, you go on the nod. You go into La La Land. You're supposed to be one of the best highs ever, and you stay like a zombie.
I'm glad you said that. It's supposed to be one of the best highs ever. Because if you'd have said, "Hey, it's the best high ever," I'd go, "Well, how do you know that?"
Yes,
but I'm glad you said that way.
When you talk to guys, they'll tell you they'll get pissed if you hit them with Narcan when they're out. They get pissed because you just ruined the best high ever for them, and that's what it's supposed to be, and that's why they continue to. They have to support their habits somewhat, so they get their girlfriends to go out and support them in their habit,
right.
or they'll steal, and you're always continually trying to maintain that certain amount of high, and but it's just weird because they get pissed when if you hit them with Narcan.
Well, so Eric, a stimulant. So he took coke earlier, and now he's taking heroin. So you want to kind of talk a little about the difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, I equate almost like taking uppers and lowers. It's you're so hyped up on cocaine and crack cocaine that you're going 1,000 miles an hour. Your heart is beating almost out of your chest. That you need to get that down. So it's like you either chase a dragon by smoking it, or you inject it, and then man, you go from the super high, adrenaline. You're staying up for days to now you're. Like he depicted it perfectly. As soon as he got injected, man, he just he was done. He was done, and he'll stay like that for a while.
Isn't that called speedballing?
Well, speedball, you're mixing drugs, but I mean, it sounds like he had he'd been up for days doing coke, and then his whatever girlfriend, whatever that she was, just gave him by chasing the dragon or by injecting them with heroin, he just came straight down. I mean, I remember arresting heroin addicts where they're just classic symptoms, pinpointed pupils and heart rate is down, and they can't function. and they're very relaxed. They're nonviolent versus somebody on PCP or even cocaine. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and so we got to throw out there. So fentanyl is the synthetic opioid, and it's 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. And essentially, what kills them on fentanyl, even when you overdose on heroin, is it slows your heart rate down so much that it just stops.
Yeah.
Your system just stops. That's what happens, right? And that's why it's killing so many people, because you only need a little bit to kill you, right? If it's 50 to 100 times stronger. And one of the reasons why so many people are dying is they don't know how much they have it. It's getting mixed with methamphetamine, it's getting mixed with cocaine, it's getting mixed with heroin, and you have no idea what dose you're getting. They're creating fake pills that they call Percocet or other types of drugs, OxyContin, and they're putting that in there as well because they want to get them hooked on this fentanyl. The dealers do, and the cartels do, and that's what's killing people. And it's killed over the last 4 years. I want to say or 5 years, killed over 400,000 Americans. Fentanyl. So this stuff is, it's just some scary stuff that's out there, and I'm really happy what's going on with China here. Now, there's parts of in between the scenes that I looked at. He's challenged by somebody regarding the church. A friend of his at church, and he says the church is a racket. And I couldn't help but look at the hedonistic themes here, right? So you got values and doing the right thing, and then this whatever it takes to feel good kind of themes, Danny, right? So it's the hedonistic themes in this movie. It's whatever makes me feel good seems to be where he's focused. So let's talk about that. I mean, you're a guy of faith, so we follow the path of the Lord, the light, and then we have this hedonism kind of leads to a path of darkness, right? Because it's not.
Yeah, it's definitely in one part in law enforcement, in the first responder community, in the military, we have a dark humor, and so it's not quite as far as dark as this was, the humor, but it's there. And he walks up on a bunch of guys sitting there. They're the detectives. They're upset and they're talking about this rape where 2 nuns got raped or something like that. That's setting the scene. And he comes up. First of all, he's loaded, and he looks like he just woke up out of bed and in the clothes that he slept in. So he just looked like crap. And he comes up with this and these guys, it shocked these guys because the bad lieutenant supposedly is Catholic, sends his kids to Catholic schools, and then hates the Catholic Church because he sees through their hypocrisy. And a lot. This isn't the first time I've heard something like that put on the Catholic Church. It's I have relatives that will tell you that the Catholic Church is a business. It's not a faith-based organization. So,
right, yeah.
I'm a little bit different from that theology, or thought process. And I'm not Catholic, but hope this Pope does well.
Well, I went to 12 years of Catholic schools. I'm Catholic, and the way I tell people, well, let me ask you a question, because I do this. I look at it. Let's look at it from a sociological perspective. Does faith have a way of stewarding our society towards the positive, even with all of its failures and breakdowns, and particularly the Catholic Church? Yes, I say, if you don't want to believe that there's does it? Yes, it does. I mean, just look at a lot of the teachings of faith, and the expectations of faith, family, raising your kids, doing all of those kinds of things that they talk about. Those are reinforcing, positive institutions within our society that help us that allowed us to be successful. Even if you look at the Protestants, the Reformation, where they reject Catholicism, we don't listen to them. We read the Word of the Lord ourselves. So what was the benefit of that? Well, let's see. Everybody had to learn to read the Bible so they can understand the Bible. So what did that do? That increased literacy. What did that allow? That allowed for the explosion of this great country we call the United States, because people embraced that. They embraced education so that you can understand the Word of the Lord and read, right? And suddenly, if you read and you're educated, then you can read other books too, right? I mean, so there's so you look at it. was the overall benefit of faith good? Lots of reasons to dislike religious groups, plus the Boy Scouts, those poor kids. Yeah, but there's a lot of reasons when you look at faith that they had a positive impact over the
That's
last
correct. And
couple
you
thousand years.
look on what's going on right now is we've gone through the last 3 or 4 really bad years, riots and uprisings and just stupidness. And all of a sudden, within the last 6-9 months, you're starting to see resurrections around the country, and in colleges especially, where the colleges at one point were protesting. Now people in these colleges are getting together, where you're getting 1,000, 3,000 people together
Mhm.
to a religious event to come to some sort of faith. So it was last weekend, the weekend before, there was like 7,500 people in Newport Beach baptized.
Right.
So it's
Yeah,
I
I
think
was listening to a news report just we came on, and I'll let you speak, Eric. Is that young men are moving to the faith right now? Whatever, I don't know what the Gen Zers or whatever they call them, but the young people are moving more towards faith right now, rejecting the secularist liberal left secularism. They're moving more towards the left, towards faith, right? What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, you know what? I've seen it not only in the media, but I mean, just from my church, it's amazing how the tide is turning, and even actually both social media and the news somewhat are seeing that, and I think it's a great thing that people are starting to see that it's but kind of a better life if you ground yourself in your faith and you look towards that and you don't look at these Instagram influencers to guide you to life. You know, there's a higher power out there that's going to help you. That's, the truth. And I mean, I think it's a good thing, and we just got to keep that going. You know, so
Well,
it's,
I also, obviously, I mean, I've read Thomas Aquinas and all that other stuff as studying political thought, Western political thought, and a lot of the foundations for our secular society are built on Judeo-Christian themes, right? The belief in that you have God-given rights, human rights, right? A lot of our Bill of Rights and the belief in the Bill of Rights derive from this faith, but yet our society, the left rejects that kind of stuff in our secular society, right? They reject the notion that we should be looking to faith at all. And I'm like, well, if we didn't look to faith at all, we wouldn't have the systems we have in place for people to advocate, because I think I mean, even if you look at the founding of our country, right, we had abolitionists who advocated for the freedom of the slave at the founding of our country, and they were doing it from a faith-based perspective, right? And they continued to agitate based upon faith and raising the conscience that we cannot call ourselves a Christian nation if we keep doing this stuff, right? I mean, that's really, so if you look at it's this belief in these Christian themes that help get us there. So I think, when he says it's a racket, and it's I to some degree I think he's just justifying his descent in depravity, right? I think he ultimately faces that reality, but yeah, that's what I think he's doing. He has to reject it because he's going down this path and he doesn't want anybody to tell him it's wrong. And I think that's part of what's going on inside today. No, I don't want to listen to church because I want to go down this path. I don't care what they say, right? I don't want my actions checked, right? And I kind of see that with the drug use stuff and all that other stuff. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I want to be free to do whatever I want. But if you as a person of faith, you are still understood. It is still understood that you do have obligations beyond yourself, right? If you're a person of faith, and if you're deep in the fog of addiction, you can't meet any obligations to anybody else.
yeah.
Right. So, all right. I was going to show this scene, but Martine said, we might get a strike on this one. And it's the depravity scene. I got a rape written here, and the rape of the nun represents degradation of all that is good. This is also, I think, the scene where the girls, we've got the girls stopped, and he, he masturbates while he's forcing them to do things that there's no real touching here between him and them, but he degrades them is really what he's doing for his own pleasure, right? So he's really gone. So I think his rejection of faith is to justify his behavior. Danny, I'll give you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, I think you're right. He what I call, he wanted to live the way of the world instead of the way of faith, and he was living that particular way and demonstrating that way, and had his demons, and that's what he wanted to do. That's where he got his. It's what's this guy's name? David Hogg, the vice chairman of the Democratic Party. What did he say yesterday? What young men should be out looking for is how to get laid and having fun. Well, this guy was living that in 1992.
Right.
It's just totally out of line and totally stupid. And on the flip side, I knew a sergeant, worked with him at Compton, that got arrested for basically doing the same thing. He was picking up the hood rats and taking them out, and you go to jail or you go with me. And it's like, you're going to risk your career on this. And he's in prison, or he went to prison.
Yeah, and diseases and everything else, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, I think we reject faith at our peril, or reject some of the teachings of faith at our peril. And I think it's easy to, people, we have to embrace secularism. We can't have any church, we can't have any faith, but, it's all bad because they don't agree with what I agree with. A lot of that rejection of faith is because I don't want anything to restrain me from doing what I want to do. And that's what do you think, Eric? I think we're on the right path with him.
I think deep down, and they showed that scene where he's crawling on his knees and he looks up and he sees the figure of Jesus, and he's like, he has his epiphany. He's like, oh my gosh, he's here. Please forgive me. Help me, help me, help me. So I think all along he knew what he was doing was absolutely wrong. And I think, like you said, when he says it's, the Catholic Church is a scam or whatever the exact words he said.
A racket, yeah.
A racket. He was trying to justify, like you said, Danny, his malfeasance and his drug addiction, his sex addiction, and his gambling. And he's just trying to justify it and say, it's a racket. I'd rather be doing these things than being who I should be, raising my kids and running my life based on the church and on the teachings and believing in God. And but I think he's got that. It's an epiphany. He sees this Jesus figure, and then he pops up, and it's this lady.
Well, we said it. We didn't think he dropped acid. I think we might have been mistaken on that. Yeah. Maybe he did drop acid, and he saw Jesus. I don't know. So
that was just his primal deep conscience reaching down to him and slapping him around. He did pick up something in Catholic school when he was growing up. So.
Come to Jesus moment example.
Yeah. Well, we are at the halfway break, Martine. I just want to make sure you're queued up and ready to go for our commercial break, so that all us old men can go visit the toilet. So
yes, give me a couple of seconds, and we'll be
okay. All right, guys. Hey, this is break time, so we'll see you in. I think we got dos momentos.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief, and we are reviewing Bad Lieutenant, the movie Bad Lieutenant, here on YouTube's Pop Culture Minefield. And I think we're just waiting for Danny to come back. I don't know if he dropped off or if he's just if his link dropped off, or we're just waiting for him to come back from his break time. Anyway, so a couple things. I wanted to show the next scene as symbolism, and we'll hit this. One of the things is showing everything good versus everything bad, and how he did it in the movie maker. So let's roll with the scene symbolism. Now he's, if I remember the scene correctly, he's in his home. He ends up in his home, right? There's his, I believe it's either his mother or mother-in-law. However, the Bad Lieutenant was, where's the crack on hookers? I'm just kidding. Harvey Keitel shows the acting chops. Yeah, he did a great job on this. When I looked up the one of the best actors generation, when I looked up what people thought about him, Cam, they this performance, they thought it was great. But so you see the scene. So here he's looking in on his daughter, right? And you see the glow above her head, right? And he looks at her, and then he looks at the infant, and I couldn't help. Okay, so you got the innocence of a girl who's made her first communion, and she's got the glow above her head. That represents good. That represents family. That represents purity. And that's to the contrary. And then he goes out and he ends up snorting coke, right? In the house, right? So I don't know. It was interesting how they did the theme of purity and goodness with her. Obviously, the communion, when she was walking up for her first communion, that was pretty obvious. But showing the bed lamp that she had and how that was structured, I thought, this is their effort to show her as to contrast the good with the evil. What do you think, Eric?
Interesting that you're absolutely right, and I'm pretty sure that he had poured the cocaine on a photograph of his daughter, and he snorts the cocaine off the photo of his daughter, which, like you said, it shows the good and then the evil. He goes and says, he's thinking, my daughter's first communion, what a wonderful experience. But then he walks right back out and gets caught by the mother-in-law, who I think has Alzheimer's or something, as he's snorting the cocaine off the photograph of his own daughter. So that was pretty powerful, good and evil right there.
Yeah, the contrast. Same question to you, Danny. What do you think?
I agree with Eric. Yeah, it is definitely the good and the evil. Now, this was to the point where I had stopped watching the movie because I just had it with what's going on, so I didn't see the scene. But I understand what you guys said. That is just like.
Well, that's how it's interesting how the movie makers do it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make this contrast in just a shot, right? And I think they did it pretty good because it's kind of like it's almost like the Godfather scene. Remember when the Godfather baptism? Michael Corleone.
Yeah.
You guys have seen that movie, right? And he's being the godfather to I forget, to his sister's kid, right?
Son
son,
and at the same time they're going out and whacking everybody.
Yeah, they're whacking everybody, right? So you have this, So I mean, obviously, that fantastic movie, and they did it in that was great. That was a great part of that movie, but it's the same kind of effort where you're trying to show the good and evil all within a series, one scene or a series of scenes. You know,
Okay.
what do you think? Godfather, same kind of effort, right, Eric?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The other thing I found interesting is during the first communion, that bookie comes up to him and sits down next to him,
Yeah.
and basically threatens him. Where's the money? Where's the money? He's gonna find out. He knows where you live. He's gonna whack you and your whole family. He'll burn that house down with you and your whole family in it during the communion. First communion.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and the lieutenant blows him off.
Yep.
Blows him off. Danny, we lost your picture. Are you still with us?
I'm still here, but I'm going to try to get me back on here.
Okay. All right. Well, just and obviously this scene shows the linkage between the two addicts, Daryl Strawberry, and our lieutenant here, the bad lieutenant here. So and here he is. I remember watching this series. I mean, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I remember watching this series. And I remember reading about Daryl Strawberry because he was all on the front page of the LA Times, Daryl Strawberry. And it's interesting. So he's counting on this addict to win his money. And of course he's in this bar and he can't believe he just keeps losing, which is amazing. So you're back with us, Danny?
I'm back.
All right. Yeah, we're gonna have to
send
like what was that? What's that thing? Best Buy, the Goon Squad, not the Goon Squad. It's
the Geek Squad.
The Geek Squad over at your house.
I had it all set up last night. Come on, turned it this morning. The laptop takes it. What the heck is going on? The laptop's not even accepting the camera or the mic. And that's where I was having a hard time with. So then I just, I'm just going to run a big USB cable to the computer behind me, because it's the monitor and I'm looking at a different monitor, it's messing up the lighting.
Right. Well, and you do podcasts all the time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and now I just went off again.
Well, we got your voice, so at least that's good. That's nice and clear. So let's roll the next scene. I think I got Dope Dealer, and this is where he goes to get his money, I believe, right after this one out. So neither picture has the power. I'm sorry, we're still rolling this scene here. I forgot how long this particular one was. There he is. He just lost money again, and he's heading out. And I forget what he owes right now. He owes,
I think it was 50,000, 60,000.
60,000 at this point.
Yeah, something like that.
And he keeps just trying to double down, which is which is crazy, right? And
now he goes to his buddy, get a hit real quick to bring him back up.
Right. Yeah, I got to remember this scene. This is New York, though. I don't think I could have ever lived in New York with all the people around. It's just that's just not my vibe. I'm not interested in that.
We've been to New York several times. I mean, it's a different experience. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed visiting there, but like you said, I couldn't live there. Even now, where we have our home now, our second home, it's even completely different than LA. It's
yeah, because LA is more of a spread out city, so you don't have the density that you have unless you live in certain parts of the city. You don't have the density that you have in New York at all. All right, Danny, what's going on, man? You there? We'll have to have him. Might have to log him out and bring him back in, Martine, because I don't know what he's doing, but he's making a lot of noise, but not contributing here. All right, why don't Martine? Why don't we knock him out? There you are. You there? There you go. Is that we can hear you now?
Okay, I'm back, I think.
All right. Okay, well let's roll with the next scene, and this is Dope Dealer. And I thought this was interesting, this scene, because obviously we have a lot of these religious themes, and he's going to get his payoff, is what I believe this scene is about.
mm-hmm.
And I did have a comment. He said, they're going to come after you. I've been dodging bullets since I was 14. I'm blessed. So, interesting that he's made that comment, right? But he's going to get his payoff, but he ends up, it's interesting. The dope dealer invites him in the house and the apartment, and there's all these religious themes going on. So he's a dope dealer. And I mean, I think Jesus' face is on the bedding there. There's all these religious themes, and there's these crosses. And the abuela there ends up giving him some pills, I believe, at the end. And he gives him a box with, I want to say it's like $17,000. The star was just throwing fastballs and doing speedballs. Yeah, he was. But it's so, and it's kind of this reddish tinge to it, right? So you get the movie making here, we're making kind of this reddish tinge. But that's sometimes the contrast with some of these gang members. I think the first time I started working jails and we saw these gang members with, the Mother of Guadalupe and Mary on their body, yet they're killers.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now the big Marva, MS-13, what is it, a tattoo, a gang tattoo or not? Well, when you're a cop, you know what a gang tattoo looks like, what a prison tattoo looks like. You understand that, and the ACLU wants to litigate every single one of those tattoos. Oh no, how do you know? What's your training experience? How do you know this? The origins of it? It's just Jesus. It's the Mother Mary. Well, if you're around Latino gang members a lot, they all have rosaries and the Mother Mary, their girlfriend's name, and yet they killed their girlfriend, but they still got her name and her face tattooed on their body. And so when I saw this, I was like, okay, this guy's dealing dope. He's probably Puerto Rican, and he's got, you can see right there the picture of Jesus right in his thing. So that's so what do you think of the dichotomy there, Eric? That is true, right? A lot of these.
Absolutely. I think the symbolism there is that he's a drug dealer, and I think that that's his mom sitting on the couch, who's also a drug dealer. But I think they're using it as Jesus protecting them from bad things, happening to them while they're going down this path, And it's interesting how as soon as he opens the door, they scoot all the kids out of the house. So it's just or out of the house or in another bedroom, so the son and the mother can deal with him. And like I said, it's more of a look at, Jesus is here to protect us from anything going wrong in this house, regardless of what we're doing in the house. He's protecting us. But
but that's a theme even with the cartels, right, Danny? So they have these saints, saints are the drug dealers that they follow. And they have these, and they pray to, and they have shrines to, in the belief that if they're at least being faith-based, that they'll be protected in their drug dealing, their cartel stuff, right?
Yeah, they have a very loose Catholic faith base where they, and it's only because Catholicism is the largest religion in the world, and in the Hispanic community all throughout Mexico and South America. I mean, Catholicism, the Spanish did real good of promoting it there, and so they have the base that they grew up on. But then once they get into their drug dealing and their cartel working and their gangsterisms, and once they get in it, they maintain that base, but they, like you said, create different saints to worship. or set up monuments for reasons that have nothing to do with Catholicism or with Christianity at all. This is the saint of the guy that's not going to let my brother cartel kill me or something. It's weird, but very misguided.
During the 90s, right when the Sinaloan cartel was really popular, there was, and I forget his name, there was a drug cartel that was, I worked Paramount back in the early 90s where the Sinaloan cartel was very prevalent. Tons of drugs coming in and out, but they all wear this medallion or this photo of this drug cartel that they idolized as a saint, because in Sinaloa, he would give money back to the community. He would support those villages, unlike the government. So they saw, all the people saw him as a saint for that reason. And they all wore his little pendant, his little photograph.
Yeah, that was the guy that before El Chapo, and what he did was, it was real big in the 90s, and it still is in a lot of the communities in Mexico, South and Central America, is where these drug lords, they are providing the services that the government's not, like electricity and fresh water and
So they get the community support for that reason, and that's why they're so, against the police going after him, because then they'll lose the support from the cartel at the local level.
Right. Danny is frozen again. That's excellent pickup there. Eric picked right up when you froze, Danny. It's like you guys are partners or something. It was perfect. It was
we all went off at the same time and then back on slowly. So I don't know if that's me or if it's on your end, because I'm losing all of you guys.
All right, I got some notes here that I have to talk about, and I don't think I did a scene on it, but you start seeing Harvey Keitel start to itch. Did you notice that as he was itching?
Yep.
And which is typical of addicts, right? There's irritation. I imagine, you're putting this poison in your body, and so you're having what do they call it? An infection? Not an infection. It's you're just having a reaction to that stuff, and you see a lot of these guys, they start itching. Is that me that's doing that? The making the noise? You guys aren't hearing it? Okay. But yeah, did you notice that, Eric, when he's just kind of itching through? He starts itching in these scenes, and you start seeing him, and to me that was indicative of a hype.
Yeah, and a lot of these drug addicts start thinking that there's spiders crawling over them, there's bugs. That's why they start swatting each other and themselves, and like I said, itching. And I don't know if you guys picked up on the paranoia also. He started to get paranoid towards the end, where he would come out, especially when he came out with the money, he had his gun with him. But then, he would come out of his car and he'd look down the street. He'd come out of an apartment, he'd look down the street. And I thought for sure sometime during the movie they would actually focus in on the surveillance team tracking him, but they never did. So, but that was just the drug addict addiction and the paranoia starting to come in on him.
Yeah, I remember making an arrest. I was called to a hotel, and I get there, and the guy was whacked out on coke, and he's probably a yuppie type, older kind of yuppie type. And he looks at me, he goes, looking around, he goes, "The Pittsburgh Mafia is after me." And I could see a big baggie of coke right in he just had a regular button-down shirt on, with a big baggie of coke in there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't really want to fight this guy. I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's pretend like I'm taking you to jail. And I'll put you in jail, and then I'll put you out the back door, at the jail, so the Pittsburgh Mafia can't get you. I don't know who they are, but I'm not. Oh, that's a good idea, sir. So I put him in jail. I take the bag of coke, and he goes to jail for the coke. But he was absolutely whacked out, paranoid. The Pittsburgh Mafia. We're in the middle of L.A. So, okay.
You know what? So you were practicing this de-escalation back in the day. That is a perfect example of de-escalation.
Hey, all I know is you get in a fight, no matter if you win the fight, you get hurt, right? And I don't want to fight some whacked out paranoid guy on coke. I just want to take him to jail. That's all I want to do and solve the problem. So I went along with this paranoia. It worked out well for me.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Danny? High on methamphetamine and coke, long-term use creates psychosis and paranoia, right?
Oh yeah, and phencyclidine. They all they all screw you up. And I'm trying to think of the word antioxidants. They create stuff in your body, and that just tear your whole system up, tearing your liver up. You're shutting down different parts of your bodies at different time, and you just get freaked out, and you go into you can't stop, because if you're going to stop going straight out cold turkey, you're going to die. So you have to be slowly let down, similar to, we've all seen guys in jail, especially going through DTs.
Yeah.
If they're not let down slowly, it's just, it'll kill you. And then, I've like Eric said, I've been in fights with people that are so whacked out they have no idea where they're at.
They think you're the Pittsburgh Mafia. Yeah, we got Gambit says cocaine is a hell of a drug, as Rick James would put it. Yeah, Rick James was jumping around Hollywood where I worked, and he was, the stories we heard about what he would do with prostitutes was pretty. I won't get into them because I mean, as Martine says, we'll get a strike, we'll get demonetized. yeah, there was, and the deprivation that these guys get into when they get hooked on coke and methamphetamine. I don't think I recall the sexual depravity that they get into on those drugs. I don't think I recall that with heroin, but these stimulants, they drive this sexual deviancy, I think. And I think a lot of in the gay community was big to use meth because it supposedly enhanced the sexual experience. And so these guys would start using this stuff and they get hooked, and it just deeper and deeper in depravity is what is going on. Let's roll the next scene, and this is I just wrote it as contrast, and this is piety versus hedonism, and I think this is about the nun, right? And so this is his confrontation with her, why she wouldn't help identify the guys who raped her, and I couldn't help but look at the contrast, which is exactly, of course, what the movie maker wanted you to do. It's like the piety of the nun, her belief in her I don't want to say dog because that's the wrong word, but her belief in her faith, and then him challenging that. And it's interesting. They put this. She believes I have to forgive these guys. Are young men and young boys, whatever. I have to forgive them. And he's saying, no, you don't. And so he's challenging her piety. And he, of course, is the worst person to do it. And this is the start where he begins to obviously question his own behavior, right? It comes forefront. But I see her as the example of extreme piety, I guess, and him as the example of unbound hedonism, right? I guess I'm looking for that right word. He knows no boundaries at this point, but he hasn't used acid yet, and he hasn't used PCP yet. So hey, there's some hope, right?
Mhm.
But he, what do you think, Danny? Am I on something there?
Yeah, it goes to the extreme on both. But within Christianity, there are a lot of people that believe as you described this nun is where, I have to forgive everybody and it's just water under the bridge now and everything's going to be peace and dandy and we're going to go out and sing Kumbaya. But, the reality of the world is, and the reality of faith is that there are consequences and you do have to be accountable for your actions. And so that's why, God gave us cups. Romans 13, 1-5 tells you about submitting to the authorities and basically giving cops the power that we have to arrest people and bring them in. And when she's playing this game of, well, it's all good now and I forgave them, and he's on the other side of he's the one that should be arrested, the most deviant guy on the entire department. It's insane, but he built the director did a good contrast of the two. You go from extreme good to almost extreme bad. The only thing this guy hasn't done is steal money, and actually he did steal money when the guys were ripping off that. Yeah, so we can't say he didn't steal. I remember he did the $500 he stole there. So the only thing he didn't do or they didn't show is him executing somebody.
Right. And I think if it was financially beneficial for him, he would have done it at some point. What do you think, Eric? Same thing. A good contrast. I mean, she's still going. I'm going to pray, and he's still pushing her, and he's in disbelief that she won't give this information, right? And it's shaking. Well, it's shaking his belief that the church is just a racket, right? Because she's sticking with what she believes is the right thing that God would do. What would Jesus do, right? She's sticking with that. And that is challenging his outlook on the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. She is sticking to her religious guns, aside from the horrible things that these two indespicable people did to her and how she suffered, she still thinks that God will make things right. And according to her teachings or her learnings, is that she must forgive those who bring bad things to other people, and specifically in this situation, herself. But like Danny said, there's some times where, people need to be held accountable, and he just cannot wrap himself around his head that she is not wanting to keep these or hold these guys accountable. I kind of saw that coming as soon as he started in the conversation. What threw me off was a scene of him looking through the door at the hospital in that scene, and they make eye contact. And I thought something else was going to happen with him and her when she was at the church, but that threw me off. But again, yeah, it's, she's just going based on what she's been taught and what she believes in, forgive and forget. And there's a lot of people that feel that way. And,
So it's, yeah, I think it says it's not just a racket. It is about strongly hidden beliefs.
Mhm.
And then abiding by those beliefs, right? And she's the example of it doing it. I do, Cam Can. You're right on there about Rick James, the king of, I think it was the king of funk, right? Yeah, that is very consistent with the kind of stuff that was going on in Hollywood when we're chasing that guy down. He was out of control, but that was not unusual in the sex, drugs, and rock and roll scene at the height of the crack epidemic, right? That was not unusual at all. And that's why I thought it was so devastating, the crack, because you saw young people get hooked and then they end up in this, selling themselves, both, men and girls, boys and girls, on the street to get their hit, right? And these depraved individuals using them for whatever they want sexually. During, so that's why, people say, well, the war on drugs was really bad. I go, not from my point of view. What I saw going on was really awful, and it was destroying communities of color, and not just in the drive-bys, but in the addiction and the life path that many people took. Many of them didn't pull out of that, right? Our lieutenant didn't pull out of that, right? In the end, he doesn't pull out of this. But that road to addiction is a road to despair and early death, right? And I'm going to be going back to visit some buddies soon here this week, and we all went on in our lives after graduating high school, and two of my friends went down the path of addiction, and they're both dead now. They're both dead because they abused their bodies. One actually got out of it and tried to turn his life around, but his body was so messed up that, he died a young man, right? And the other one died just a year later. And they had a girl that I went to high school with that went with us. She's dead too. So this road of addiction is a short road. Typically it ends a lot sooner for you than it does for other people that live a good and wholesome life, so if you go back to the sociological perspective of faith, if you live a good life, right, you probably live a long life, right, Eric?
Yeah. Like you said it, Pat, it just, we've all seen it on the streets. And it doesn't only just affect that person, that drug user, it affects their family,
Yeah.
And go ahead and ruin your life. But the fact is that you ruin your entire family's life. And you're not contributing to society, and you're just a hindrance to society and your family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think, Danny? You can tune in there. You're muted. A life of addiction is a short life, right? And so if you look at faith,
what I was looking at just now is you go back and you look at the story of David Ruffin, who was the lead singer of the Temptations. And,
I like them.
Yeah, so did I. I mean, great singer, great this, but the guy would go on these benches. He would sober up every once in a while and do really good. And then he'd go on these benches and just, wasting all the money they made and miss performances because they were on tour and he's just getting high. And then at his very end, he gets tossed out of a car in front of a hospital, and he's dead, which is not uncommon in South Central Los Angeles. Is people getting tired? I've seen it. How many times have you sat out in front of Harbor General Hospital in the parking lot of the emergency room, because it's a crime scene now because some body got tossed out there. It happens more often than not. And that's the early death that these drug abusers get. They get shot. One kid I knew, he got all loaded and everything like that. He just fell out into didn't take care of himself, and he was so badly infected that he died of an infection walking home. He just fell down on the sidewalk and dead. And it's like, this stuff will kill you.
Yeah, they're not taking care of you. As Campkin says, crack was definitely a plague. I saw the effects firsthand in Baltimore. Yeah. And New York City shootings and ODs every day and every night. My neighborhood became a war zone. And that was an example of going on everywhere. And so, when we talk about the context of time this is set in, right? So we do have to understand that cops are impacted by the societal ills of the day, right? So they're not immune to temptation. They're not immune to the challenges that society is going through. And I guess if we look at our bad lieutenant here, it's not surprising that some of them, like we had Michael Dowd of NYPD and a lot of the corruption on NYPD regarding crack. Okay, it's not, and our own Arco Narco scandal. It's the sign of the times, I think, is the phrase that's used. So it's not unusual that some will be tempted and some will go down that wrong path. Given that a lot of people are in the crack epidemic and now with fentanyl. You kind of agree with that, Scott? We're not immune. Eric, we're not immune, right?
Oh, no one's immune. I mean, you could be a multi-billionaire or a crackhead in Detroit. It doesn't matter. It happens to everybody. I mean, how many times have we heard stories of these executives living this life with their trophy wife and the 3 kids, and kind of find out the wife is a coke addict, but living every day. Politicians, athletes, cops, firemen, society in itself, no one is immune to the horrible effects of drug addiction, but they focus, the news media tends to focus on those less privileged,
yes,
on those folks that don't have the same, I guess less privileged. They seem to focus on them versus they don't want to come out with a story of so-and-so, the executive, the CEO of this company is a drug addict, because that'll have ramifications. They'll get sued or whatever. But yeah, it doesn't exclude anybody from society.
Well, that's where the faith is, where they say faith is, it tells you have a higher purpose than just these earthly hedonistic feelings that you're pursuing with drugs or sex or whatever it is. And I think, so that's where I think faith and Catholicism and, whatever, just Christian or Jewish, it gives you a purpose beyond just exploring your hedonistic desires, right, Danny? So that's why, and so I think that's kind of the message coming out in this movie, right?
That's right. Faith gives you that foundation or the rock to build your life on, and people with faith tend to, I'm not going to say they don't get into bad things, because it's, in the entire, it doesn't matter what religion you are. It's well documented that people in faith have fallen, but it gives you a rock, and it's something you can kind of go back on to say, I'm not going to do this because it's not what my moral values are, and not what I was built on this foundation of faith in the very beginning. You go and you see some of these people. I mean, you're sitting in a room. Think about this. You're sitting in a room all by yourself, and there's several $100,000 sitting in front of you, and you're the only one there. The narco guys are out in the front yard saying, talking and doing whatever. You're the only one there, and that temptation's there. You know what? There's no overtime. This was what was going on in the 90s when there was no overtime, and these guys are sitting in this room, and it's like, I can just reach down and take $1,000. No one will miss it. And that was happening. I know it happened throughout the United States, not only just with Arco Narco. And it's, for some reason, either they stepped off that rock or they never had that foundation built in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think faith is a strong. It's important to have to have a strong society, in my opinion, and not everybody has to have a faith. But when you have a strong segment or a strong percentage of your population that believe in faith and believe in a higher being, and or a higher purpose for you as a person, it just strengthens your society versus weakens it. And I think that's kind of the path. We're going on a bad path with that. But I did want to throw out, because somebody mentioned Baltimore, and there was this great actor, Michael Williams, and you might remember him from The Wire. I forget the character he played in there, but he played Chalky White in the series Boardwalk Empire, a black guy, and he chipped at heroin every now and then, right? And he went down to get heroin, and it ended up, maybe it was cocaine, I can't remember which one it was, but they laced it with fentanyl and it killed him. And he was one of my, I really liked him as an actor. He was a black guy. He was the one with the scar in his face, black guy with the scar in his face. And I just thought he was great, and I really enjoyed his characters. But it just showed to me that, this fentanyl could touch anybody, and that you never know who's chipping at this stuff. You never know who's, and he was probably managing in his life, but obviously laced with fentanyl because they wanted him to be addict. Even redemption is what gives us the film Bad Lieutenant is a crucial message. Yeah, redemption. Let's get into that scene. Let's see. I need help, and this is I think this is the one where he's in the church. I think, yeah, here we go. This is where he sees he has his come to Jesus moment, as you talk about, Eric, and he's realizing that he's already met with the nun, right? He's beginning to question his life path here. It's probably too late for him, and he's in church. He's drunk, and he's apologizing for everything he's doing. And the thing about it, I think one of you guys said it destroys families too. He's on the road to destroying his family, right? He's on that path, and he either doesn't see it or he doesn't care at this point, because the addiction is more important to him. And then he has this crisis of faith. And I was going to talk about this before, but I think this is time now. There are a lot of people. Yeah, Michael Williams, you know who I'm talking about, Gambit. Good actor. But there's a lot of people that find the Lord in prison. They find that Lord. But and I remember when I was doing anti-recidivism programs, I thought, you know what, if that is the path that opens the door for recovery, then, because you're always suspicious, right? But if that's the path that opens the door for recovery, and they think, well, I got to do this because this is what God says or Jesus said I should do, and it helps them stay on that path, even if it's just for a few years as they recover and they relapse and they try again, that's okay. That's good. I mean, you heard me open up with the LA Mission. It has a faith-based element, and that's their belief. God. Some people come to recovery through God, and that's good. And this film is about that. He rejected faith, something that was probably part of his life, his whole life, because he's probably baptized and went to church and Catholic schools and all. And now he's embracing. And here it is. Here's right. He sees Jesus. Now it's the old lady that he's looking at, right? So good scene. And I think this is what made. I think all the stuff with Harvey Keitel as an actor in this film, it's the correct characterization of what happens when you're on coke, long-term effects of coke, the correct characterization of what happens when you chase the dragon there and you get on heroin, and the alcoholism and the depraved sexual stuff and what that looks like. And then suddenly this scene where he's having his come to Jesus moment, because those moments are very private for a lot of people, right, Eric?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's a relationship between you and Jesus Christ in private for the most part, but like he made it public on this one. But like you said, it's okay. I mean, I think he finally realized, I need to turn my life around, and tries to start trying to do the right thing for the last 2 minutes of the movie, but it ends up catching up to him. But yeah, it's that relationship between you and Jesus Christ, and whether it's public or private, it is what it is. You know.
And we'll talk about it in a minute here, but um, as he realizes it's this old lady and she's got the chalice, right?
Hmm.
She's got the chalice. So, and this is, I guess, his first test. So he's okay. I'm having this come to Jesus moment. I want to re-embrace my faith. I want to do the right thing. Now, I personally think the right thing is take those guys to jail, but but he gets a lead. This lady says, "Hey, this chalice, belongs to the church," and and she tells him that these are the people who had it, right? So she directs him to the bad guys, and this is his first test. How do I handle this?
Yeah.
Now, a hedonistic, zero value, he might just shoot him, right? And maybe steal their money because he ends up going to a dope house where they're at. They're probably using dope too, which seems to be the theme of the movie. Sold the stuff that they took in the church to get a hit, and they're in well, we call it a shooting gallery, right? That's kind of what they call it, right? But this is his first test. He goes through this very private, anguished moment, and now he immediately faces his test. How do I handle this as a person who believes in faith now, right? That's kind of how you see this, or that's how I saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he goes into that shooting gallery, that house, that apartment, and kicks out the prostitutes, and sees those two guys and sits them on the couch. And he knows he's got them dead to rights, no pun intended. The thing that I found pretty ironic is that they don't really do much until the end of the game. They have to watch the end of the Dodger Mets game,
Yeah.
And I think at that point when he realizes, I just lost $120,000. Now I'm up to $200,000 I owe my bookie. I'm done. This is it. This is the last chapter of my life, my obituary. This was going to be said. So, and I think that at that point he starts realizing, okay, so the nun has already forgiven these guys, doesn't want to prosecute these guys. I guess I'm not going to take them to jail. And that's when the next, goes to the end of the movie. So.
Yeah. I think he had some dope with him, right, too. So he
Yeah.
hasn't quite recovered yet. So Danny, come to Jesus moment. These are very personal things, right? And that can be a very important part of turning a corner on addiction and a depraved life, right?
That's right. You think of Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was the guy that went from rags to riches to rags, deep into addictions with amphetamines and methamphetamines. And then he hooks up with June Carter Cash, and he eventually has his come to Jesus moment and lived a fruitful life afterwards. Now since I told you at the beginning of the movie, I never made it to the end. I'm reading the Wikipedia on it right now, and it's in the cigar box was $30,000 is what he gave these two thugs to, get out of town with.
Well, let's roll that scene, forgiveness, and I think it's it's kind of skewed. I don't know. I basically says he gets these two guys, and you're right, Eric. He has to wait to watch. Do I win or lose here? and obviously he loses because that's the path that he's on, right? Being the loser.
Yeah.
And he decides to that he's not going to take these guys in, right? That he's going to take them to the bus station and put them on a bus and give them the money.
Yeah, exactly.
But you guys can't stay here. Now, what's the old, get out of Dodge and don't ever come back kind of thing. I mean, that's not an unusual thing in a cop movie, but I had a hard time with this scene. I think I'd have taken him to jail. Well, but I'm not an addict, right? And I think his method for following the word of the Lord here is following, because what didn't God also say, give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God what is God, and that means basically follow the secular laws, and then follow the teachings of Christ in your heart, right? So you still want to make this arrest because these guys are still dangerous for other people.
Mhm.
That's kind of how I see it. So I think this was, just yeah, I think they could have figured out how to do this a little differently, right? That's just my opinion. What do you think, Eric?
I think that it was kind of from one addict to another. This is your chance. I'm not going to take you to jail, but you need to leave town and don't come back. And oh, by the way, here's $17,000 to get you back on your feet wherever you land out in Florida.
Yeah.
I think that's the way I took it. Is like from one addict to another. I got my come to Jesus moment, and she doesn't want you to go to jail. You didn't have to say anything about it, but just get out of Dodge. So that's the way I took that.
In today's world, it would be a Democrat, and they'd be taking someone out of a federal prison before he gets deported back to El Salvador, and they just let him back out on the streets.
Yeah.
It's the same skewed concept. It's like, come on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they'll use, well, you believe in God, so you should believe in forgiveness, so we should take these people out of prison. Yeah, but there is a thing called a punishment too, and they'll pick, the left will pick and choose things out of faith, out of the Bible to justify why we should do things, and then challenge you with it. And hey, I believe in that saying, give to Caesar what is Caesar, which is they got to follow the laws, as you would say. And so this was the law of the land, so we're going to do it, right? And but they have this the left's got scams going on getting people out of prison. It's crazy because I've been doing shows on that stuff, and it's how far they go. But in this case, well, what do you think, Danny? Do you think this wasn't the perfect way of redemption in my mind? This was it may have made him feel good, but it was the wrong path. He should have just taken those guys to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Unrealistic. And the other part is, you see in the walk, I'm thinking, maybe only in New York can you walk down the streets and nobody notice what's going on with these guys, right?
Yeah.
And the cop, you see, he goes into the bus station. The cop kind of sees him there. He thinks there's something going on, but there's no interaction between him and the lieutenant. There's a cop right by the door there. And I'm thinking, only in New York could you walk down the street and nobody's looking at you, and of course you got to unhandcuff them and put them on the bus. So, and they're and he sent them to L.A. We're going west to L.A., right? That's what they're probably doing.
Yeah.
But I just didn't think this was the right way. I think they could have done something a little different for the end of the movie, and I think they were doing rewrites all the way through the movie as I was reading about this. The people who wrote it. What do you think of this part of the movie, Danny?
Yeah, no, like I said, it's just bizarre. There's no rhyme. I mean, it's so far out there. You can't grasp it. And you're right that they were rewriting the script continually over and over and over. And then after it was released, it was there were parts that weren't put in. Blockbuster at the time wanted the movie, but they had to take parts out of the movie, and they had to add other parts into the movie, which really made it weird. And then on top of that, it was banned in Ireland.
Yeah,
this movie, it's wild. So the Irish figured it out that this is just way out there to a point.
They didn't like the way it portrayed women, right? And Ireland, I would have thought it would have been they didn't like the way it portrayed the Catholic Church at the time, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was part of it too, that they just didn't put that in the in the notes.
Well, let's so here he is. He's saying goodbye to these guys, and now it does take a heck of a lot of faith to believe that you're going to release these guys and they're not going to do anything else, because they haven't had a come to Jesus movement. That's one of the reasons why you have, but they haven't, and that's they're like, hey, I'm just feeding. I think they're addicts, so they're feeding their addiction. God, is that me doing that? Martine, do you know who's doing that? Is that me? I mean, are you hearing some strange noises, guys, or is that just me on my end?
Yeah, I'm hearing it, and I just while it was going on, I had my mic muted just to make sure it wasn't me. So
let me mute my mic. It might be the furnace back here.
Well, I don't hear it. Okay, well.
Okay, so I'm in my basement. So.
Oh, okay, all right.
I have a mechanical room over here.
Well, we only have one more scene to go, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how would NYPD handle this. Their guy killed in the line of duty, but he's probably got a, when they do the tax screen on this guy, Jesus, So let's roll out his death, right, and then we get a chance to talk about the cover-ups, the possible cover-up. So here he is. He's in front of the station, and they just do. Somebody just pulls up next to him and executes him right there, and eventually somebody figures it out, and you see that scene. So
he's parked in front of Trump Plaza.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It says Trump. There you go. Well, that couldn't have been purposeful because this movie was made in the they didn't know he was going to be president, right?
Right.
And the car just pulls up. So it's probably I'm thinking this is La Costa Nostra. I can't see them taking a bet from a cop, but I can't see them actually shooting a cop. But you know what? It's the movies.
I think it was that the guy he owed money to, the $200,000, because he told him you're going to die, and the car pulls up and goes, "Hey, copper!" He yells at me, and
I just think it would have been more valuable to him on the line, Well, we need information then if you can't pay your bill, right? We need you to work with us. But let's talk about, so Danny, cops who commit suicide, do the departments hide that stuff?
Very much so. And one recent one on April 30th in Foster City, California, an on-duty Foster City Police Department sergeant walked into the station and died by suicide. The city of Foster City, they have, even to this point, refused to acknowledge his death as a suicide or his death at all. He did have a funeral, and the police chief did show up. Unfortunately, the police chief and the former police chief did some things that probably weren't proper etiquette for a funeral. They were standing outside the hearse laughing about something, and it's just not proper. But that's just one. In the state of New York, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Pat. The state of New York at the time had 7 suicides. New York City just had another suicide over the weekend. So they're up around 7 or 8 or 8 or 9 on the state. But you don't hear anything about it. The only reason I do is because I belong to different groups of officers that are talking about this issue. But you'll very seldom will you ever hear anything about it. And it's just sad.
So in this scene, though, they're not going to talk about it. That's not going to hit that. He's because, hey, lieutenant executed in the line of duty, and I don't think they're going to go down the whole.
Yep, he's going to be considered a line of duty death. They're going to put his name on the wall, and he's going to be a hero. And and the truth will never come out because they don't want to put stain on the police department.
And they want Mama to get the insurance benefits.
Right. It's there's, I think right now it's the federal government pays like $400,000 to a family to a Gold Star family of a police officer. So it's quite a chunk of change.
Right. Yeah, and the state kicks in. So feds kick in, state kick in, and then whatever insurance benefits they may have signed up for when they became when you get signed on our department, you could sign up for that stuff.
And
but
since I mentioned the wall, Pat, as a lot of your viewers probably don't know, but in Washington, D.C., there is a law enforcement memorial for everybody who died in the line of duty. This week, beginning on the 11th and through the weekend, next weekend, is considered Police Week. And on May 15th, it's called Peace Officer Memorial Day. So we honor the lives of those who died in the line of duty. So.
Yeah. So we got a comment here. Roger Ebert said something interesting. Whenever he brings up a movie like this, people will send letters in. How could you like a disgusting, vulgar picture like this? I think the one thing, if you want to look at this picture, I don't like the movie because it portrays a cop in a very bad light, which is exaggerated. But if you want to get the theme of good and evil, there are settings that you can do that in, and certainly law enforcement offers that opportunity. Certainly a war movie where people go off the reservation in terms of what they can do legally in war. But they both of these, you're engaged in either fighting or suppressing the worst aspects of human behavior, war or police, and it offers this opportunity to show this extreme contrast between good and evil. What do you think, Eric? That's what we're seeing in this movie, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and like I think you hit the nail on the head, is that they use a certain segment of society or profession, such as someone in the armed forces or in law enforcement, to do this. If the writers, directors try to make this movie on a guy who was a baker at a bakery, it wouldn't be the same effect. It's totally different because they put the military, law enforcement at a higher level of not only respect of duty and honor of what they're supposed to do. If there's a guy working at a bakery or a barista working at Starbucks that's going through the same thing, who cares? It's just another human, a regular person. But you expect that a cop or a military veteran, they're put on that higher pedestal, that they should know better than what's good and bad. Politicians, don't get me started on that. It's politician does this, oh well, you'll get reelected. Who cares? But a cop does this, throw him in prison, throw the book at him, or there's been so many situations where they've tried to Navy SEALs for murder for something that supposedly happened in Afghanistan. They have no proof of because there's people didn't like the way that he manages his team because they didn't like to accept responsibility and do the job. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they just, in conflict, whether it's a conflict on the streets or a conflict in war, allows for the extremes to come out, I think, is where, and that's why they use police or war or these extreme situations to show the challenge of good and evil in these difficult spots. Hey, Danny, we got time for one more comment. We'll give it to you to, your thoughts on that.
It's definitely on the good and evil part, and you had to throw politicians in there because they're all rhino and evil. But yeah, my final takeaway is you're right there. It kind of took it to the extremes, and it seems like whenever they do a police corruption movie, it's always the New York Police Department, and why don't you shift it up to Chicago? Let's go to Detroit. Let's go to your hometown. They did what LA Confidential was corruption with LAPD, but then you take LA Confidential, you turn it off and turn on Adam 12, and it's all hunky dory. But it seems like every corruption movie you ever see is NYPD.
With a little bit of the Big Easy, New Orleans, and but but you know what too? It's like, we didn't do the Gangs of New York. I should do the Gangs of New York. I like that movie. But York was such a cesspool of corruption for 100 years, right? And I try to explain to people, I go, when you grow up in a cesspool of corruption, you don't see that as corrupt.
That's right.
It's the system, right? And if you need to improve it, you need to, there needs to be real overt setting of expectations and values, which faith could provide. But a lot of them were faith even during the corruption, right? And to move your way out of it. And I think York has done a good job of doing that. But, right now they're mired in a corruption scandal with their senior management. All the way to the top. The commissioner stepped down, deputy commissioner stepping down. They were, taking money. The commissioner's brother was jamming up nightclubs. We'll make sure the cops don't bother you. You can do whatever you want. You just got to pay me. And then he pay, so a lot. I mean, that's at this most senior level. And assistant fire chiefs for New York were getting jammed up because hey, I'll give you a permit for pay. So it seems like it under de Blasio and this guy Eric Adams, it just devolved back down into a corrupt cesspool at the very top, and it's crazy. Then what does that say? When you have it at the very top, what does it say to the guy on the streets? Well, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
the
what he
culture
said.
of the department, and that's the culture in the law enforcement profession. Period. Is it's so deeply ingrained that
In New York, yes.
yeah, well, not so much corruption in the entire profession, but the culture of the profession is it's always, this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we're going to do it now,
Yes.
and we're not going to change. And you can get 100 of us on a 150 person department that have the same attitude as this has got to change, but the youngster that comes up that wants to climb the ladder and be the next police chief is going like, this is the way we always did it. And this, dude, you don't even know the way it was always done.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what you're seeing in New York, and that's what you're seeing on some of the other larger departments. That
I think
that have
New York,
issues.
New York just it's lost ground in a lot. I mean, I do a show, New York's Finest Unfiltered. I listen to those guys. They've been on my show. I've been on their show, their podcast, and just the amount of corruption in New York at the senior level is crazy. We are at the end of our show. They need to have a little more piety in New York, a little more faith in New York to recover from the latest corruption scandals. You guys, thank you for joining me for this show. You can stick around for a debrief. Martine, I think we are ready. You can take it away. And thank you all my guests for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.